Welcome to Troon Vineyard. We're a 100-acre regenerative, organic certified and biodynamic certified farm here in the Applegate Valley in Oregon. We're using regenerative practices here like cover cropping, compost, animal integration throughout the whole farm. We're creating wildlife habitat and biodiversity reserves. And as we move the animals throughout the vineyards and throughout all of these pasture areas, we're incorporating the animals in a way that allows them to live freely and exercise the 5 freedoms to provide the best animal welfare possible. And we're trying to do that with our people as well. On the social side, the Troon team here that helps manage this land and steward this land, and also provide really wonderful experiences in the tasting room. We all live and work here year-round. And we're really excited to share these regenerative practices with you as they promote soil health and healthy communities and a healthy planet. Okay, so we call this area our biodynamic education garden. This is part of our 10 acres of wildlife habitat. This is supporting all kinds of pollinators with these perennial flowers. These are just starting to open. Many of these flowers just opened up in the last couple of weeks, and they'll continue flowering all the way through October, November, providing this year-round food source and shelter for all of our beneficial pollinators. And in this education area, we also have this interpretive signage. This is designed to inform all of our visitors and to help out on farm tours, explain about biodynamics. And so we're using this as an opportunity to explain our farm practices and some of the more unique aspects of our farming practices, which is the biodynamic preps. So here are the pits where we're also burying our biodynamic preps. So 500 is right here underneath this stone, where all of our horns that are buried last fall around the autumnal equinox are buried, and they'll remain there for just about 2 more weeks. We'll dig up those horns and we'll extract the contents of the horns, and we'll stir that into water and apply that all over the farm. So we're here at the vermicompost bin. We use worm composting, or worm poop basically, as one of our practices to really promote soil health and fertility out on the farm. We're making about 200 tons of finished biodynamic compost every year, and we're also supplementing that with vermicastings. We use the vermicompost to make compost tea. We brew about 100 gallons of compost tea every day, and we can both inject that directly into the irrigation system and send out all of the diversity and abundance of microorganisms all over the farm, anywhere that we send irrigation water. And we can also use that compost tea to apply directly to the leaves of the plant or as a foliar spray. And the diversity of microbes, actually, these are all beneficial microbes. And by putting them all over the surface of the leaf, it actually will protect the leaf from any sort of other pathogen or disease from coming in. And so it's almost like a biological armor for the leaf surface. When we irrigate with the compost tea, we send all of those beneficial microbes into the root zone, and they're protecting the roots from any sort of fungal disease from coming in, but they're also really supporting the plant's health, the plant's vigor. They're cycling nutrients and making those nutrients available to the plant. And there's a really beautiful symbiosis between every living plant that is photosynthesizing, and they're capturing sunlight, they're turning that into sugars, and they're sending that carbon down into the soil to feed the microbes. The microbes use that energy to then break down the rocks or break down the soil and release those nutrients back to the plants in a really harmonious symbiotic relationship. Here in the fertility barn, we're also making and storing our biodynamic preparations. Here we've got an example of some dandelion blossoms that we harvested from the farm. These were just growing natively out in the pasture, and we're harvesting the blossoms, and we use them to make preparation 506. It's one of the compost preparations that we're making really great biodynamic compost from.
Go ahead.
We'll also use these drying racks to save seed. We've got some basil seed that we saved from last year as well. And by collecting and saving this seed that was cultivated here on this farm, we know that it's adapted to this region, to this climate, and will perform better year after year after year by saving our own seed as opposed to bringing in seed from off the farm. One of the goals of biodynamics is to really reduce those off-farm inputs, and so that can be fertilizers, that can be seeds, That can be any sort of input for the farm. We're really trying to generate fertility from within the farm, and a couple of ways that we do that is by saving seeds and by growing our own biodynamic preps right here on the farm. We're also storing all of our biodynamic preparations here in the fertility barn, here in these preparation storage boxes. In this one, we are storing barrel compost as well as our preparation 500. 500 is the cow horn manure preparation. This is maybe what you've heard of, if you've heard anything about biodynamics, is taking cow manure, raw, organic dairy manure in this case, and putting it into cow horns and burying it in the ground over winter until it no longer resembles cow manure. This is a beautiful biodynamic preparation that's designed to be stirred into water, into a rhythmic way to aerate that water and dynamize it, to energize that water, and to spray this preparation, this microbial community and this life force that really comes directly from this farm, and to spray that out onto the soil as a ground spray during the springtime. This is really designed to stimulate soil fertility and soil health. Very similarly, we've also got our barrel compost. This is a really unique biodynamic preparation in which we include all of the compost preparations, 502 through 507. We also mix in some of our chickens' egg shells, as well as a basalt rock dust that's collected locally here. And we do a similar process where we start with primarily cow manure. We add in all of those ingredients, the egg shells, the basalt dust, and we mix that for about 1 hour. And then we bury that in a pit. Ours is a brick-lined pit. It was originally designed to be in a barrel, which is where the name barrel compost comes from. This barrel compost we use also to stimulate fertility, soil fertility. This is full of the whole beneficial suite of microorganisms, and we can add this to our compost tea. We can add this to our root dip. We actually dip the roots of all of our trees and our plants before planting them, and that inoculates the roots with this beneficial bacteria that's coming from our biodynamic preparations. We're out here in the vines. We're next to our old Syrah block. What we're looking at is both a version of our flowering cover crop. What we've got is some crimson clover as well as our California poppies. There's about 30 different species of cover crops that we use here in the vineyard, and it's all trying to support soil health. These vines were planted about 30 years ago, and so they have a really deep taproot that's able to go down and collect the water. We're in the middle of a big replanting project, so all 50 acres of vines will be replanted here over the course of the next year. We'll finish this replanting project, and we've installed these drip lines to help support and establish those new vines. And our irrigation practices are designed to encourage these young plants to grow that really deep taproot, and so that within, hopefully, the next couple of years, 5 years or so, we can move towards dry farming and just completely shut off the irrigation and our dependence on this critical natural resource. We're using some other practices in the vineyard, like head training. This is not an example with this Syrah, but all of our new reds have all been planted in a style of head training or bush vines that really allow us to use less water, as well as protect the fruit during those hot summer months that we get here in Oregon. So we're also working towards no-till farming, which means no tilling or no plowing or soil disturbance, if you will. So these flowers are an example of that, and we're planting cover crops all throughout the farm. We use a little bit of tillage in the first 2 years to help the vines get established and help reduce some of that competition when the vines are young and the root systems are still small. As our irrigation practices and our compost and biological support that we provide for the plants gets better every year, the soil gets healthier every year, we intentionally cultivate and we plant seeds for all of these wildflowers. Grasses and feed for the sheep is growing in the alleys in between the vines. And we're also planting legumes. These are plants that grab free nitrogen out of the atmosphere, and they allow us to use less water to support these plants. And it's actually a common misconception that a lot of people have, that to use cover crops actually requires more water because you have to water them, or you have to water your vines more because they're competing with the cover crops. And what we found is that's just not true. Maybe in the first couple of years it requires a little bit more water, but the reality is they're actually keeping water in the soil And by building organic matter in the soil, you're building your water holding capacity. And what that allows you to do is use less water, because your soil is that sponge that can hold on to water and release it as the plants need it. And the cover crops really help to protect the soil by building organic matter, preventing evaporation, and supporting the microbial life that's so critical to the support of all of these plants. We are here in the greenhouse at Troon Vineyard. This is brand new to us. We just finished construction on this about 1 month ago, and we immediately jumped right into planting all of our seeds for our vegetable garden. It's the perfect time of year in the spring to be planting out all of our crops. So we've got both our spring crops like our beets and carrots and peas planted, as well as all of our upcoming summer crops like our zucchini, our winter squash, our tomatoes and chilies. Here in the greenhouse, in addition to planting all of our vegetable starts for our garden, we're also doing a whole bunch of flowers, herbs, and native plants that we will plant basically all over the farm. You saw the wildflower habitat that we're expanding. We're planting out our tasting room garden. We're creating these intentional wildlife habitat and these pollinator habitats throughout the farm. And a lot of what we're focusing on is the use of perennial plants. So we've got things like calendula and borage and a lot of these flowers that are going to come back every single year, as well as spread seed. And so by propagating plants here in the greenhouse, we can create more habitat, we can create more pollinator and wildlife habitat, as well as edible and medicinal herbs. These will be harvestable crops, just like the vegetables that we can serve to our community, that we can present to our guests as they come out to visit the farm and come for events like farm-to-table dinners or tours. We're really excited about this opportunity that the greenhouse presents to do plant propagation as well as seed starting. So we're here in the wildflower meadow down here near our vegetable garden. Altogether here on Troon, we've got more than 10 acres of wildlife habitat and biodiversity reserves. That looks different in different places. Here we're in a planted and cultivated wildflower meadow. We're also adjacent to a 2.5 acre lake that has lots of waterfowl and migratory birds. And all throughout our 100-acre farm, we're really trying to intentionally cultivate space for wildlife, to intentionally include habitat to support pollinators. All of these flowers are feeding bees, butterflies, beneficial insects that help us control the pests in the vineyards and throughout the farm. And so this is food source, this is shelter, this is habitat for native wildlife to thrive here amongst the agriculture that we're practicing.